Dave, I got to talk to you about something for a second. So everybody has these things now, right? And we all have, online Google Drive, OneDrive, whatever, Dropbox, Box. There's a million different. So, this gets talked about a little bit, like what happens when you die, right? Literally. So like an Apple, finally, they gave that thing.
Watch my back now? What's going on?
I mean, you're in Rhode Island, which has quite the history.
It does.
Dave, are you in the garbage business now?
I am not.
Okay, good.
I do have a cousin who's
don't want to talk about it. No.
Allegedly.
Chrissy, do you have family in the garbage business?
I told you guys, my high school boyfriend was the garbage guy for San Francisco. Marine Sanitary Service, the Garbarinos. I'm just saying. There you go.
I got aptly named.
We used to call them Garbage-arino.
Yes, so, I know nothing. I didn't actually. I'm sorry, we cut out there, Chrissy. So
you asked.
You asked.
No idea. But one of the things that I'm a computer nerd, right? I mean, I think you two know that. I don't know that our listeners know that, but I was a computer nerd long before all the rest of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I have multiple layers of systems to ensure that I have backups, that I keep stuff that I intend to keep. And then, Dave is busy telling me that he can't upload. He's got to delete an old episode because his Google Drive is full. And I'm like, man, I've got like 29 terabytes free on my Google Drive. Yeah. And, this is such a unique issue that's coming up. And Chrissy, did you used to watch Hoarders, or is it even still on?
Of course I watched Hoarders. It's like, also I dated a guy whose mom was nominated for the show, and I'm not kidding.
Of course I watched Hoarders.
I'm pretty sure my own mom is one. It's just that her hoarding is in a U-Haul storage somewhere in Pasadena. And my sister and I are like, fuck, are we inheriting that? Like when she passes? Like, honestly,
this is auction it off.
Terrible thing to say. This is terrible, but I'm going to say it out loud because I know a lot of people are thinking it. When your parents get into that 70s and 80s, and my parents are both 10 years apart, so my dad's 83 and my mom will turn 73. I buy my dad gifts now for his birthday thinking, I'm going to inherit this. So I'm going to get this. So is
buy stuff that you want.
Yeah, I get him like cool records and shit because I'm just like, if I buy him another hat that says Super Dad, I'm getting that. So,
David, for Zephyr, should he choose to have kids one day?
Right, we've got a lot. And I also I always buy him like a gaslighting present. So I think for Christmas I got him a Trump mug that's just like, you're the best. There's no one better than you. You're the best dad. You're the best, like with Trump on it. Like no one can do it better.
Are you going to get him one of those Trump phones?
Oh my God. No, I'm not going to get him a gold-plated Trump phone because he would probably just drop it. And but I think Hoarders is a thing for boomers and older. They're attached to their shit.
And Dave is a digital hoarder.
I am, but also on the father thing, the sad irony for me is the things that I buy that anyone else might use for the old man won't use those. The only things he will wear or use are the mug that's like my favorite dad or the number one dad t-shirt. I got him the number one dad t-shirt that appears in that Seinfeld episode. And when I put that out for him every Father's Day and on his birthday to wear to the beach, and he sweats in it too. You have to peel it off his body. And there's actually a line in the show. This shirt never leaves my body. Once he puts on the number one dad shirt, he will try and wear that for a week. So the only shit that he will use is the shit that's unique to best dad in the world. Yes. That's it. Nicest thing otherwise.
My dad still has the shirt from the Northgate Mall in Terra Linda that has like a shitty picture of me and my sister on it that you got made in the mall, and he still fits in it and he wears it. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like it's like threadbare, and he's like, I'm still rocking it. Still love my daughters.
But we're talking about that
Seinfeld too, by the way.
We will die with the digital hoarding, right? Like I would be like, where's my Shutterfly from 1998? Like I'm serious. I still have like a Kodak.com. It's like, it's going to get rid of your photos. I'm like, the hell it won't. I will give you $50. I will give you that money.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm going to buy a photo book just so this
and they're
stays
like
on here.
shitty
Yeah.
photos. Like, I'm just like, whoa, those are
Well,
terrible.
I don't know about you guys, but like that's my area that I can never keep up with is photos because, for example, and Chrissy, tell me if this happens to you, but like if I post something to an Instagram story, it creates this weird like blank in my photo album.
Yes, it creates like a secondary album. I was like wondering why, and don't judge me because I'm an Android user.
We already judge you, Miss Green Bubble. Our text chain sucks. I hate our text chain.
I get that secondary thing, and so I like went to go buy a new phone, and the guy was like, okay, so what do you want storage wise? And he looks at my storage on my old phone. He's like, I think you should upgrade, and I'm not saying that because I'm trying to upsell you, but like, holy shit, chick, like, what's in your phone? And I was kind of like, all right, like, but I was like, he's like, also, why does your Instagram make another copy thing? And I was like, I don't know how to change that. I didn't fucking do that. That's the phone. I'm not trying to. Like, it's just making all these albums. And then I'm like, what fucking. And then I was like, I get the emails like every day, like, here's your Microsoft memories from 2006. I'm like, oh, that's so cute. Like, honestly.
So what's interesting about the digital hoarding that we're all going to be left with in the future, or we're going to leave behind for others, is there's going to be a lot of hoarding that we're going to be going through. It appears like soon, but physical, maybe more from the boomers and elder Gen Xers, because I don't know if you guys saw, but late in the middle of the night, essentially the Senate Republicans agreed to move to the floor of the Senate to debate the so-called big, beautiful bill that passed the House. And we still find out, and this is why every time when my friends talk to me about, oh, but Republican so-and-so, not naming Susan Collins specifically, or Josh Hawley in this case, or Lisa Murkowski in this case, those senators, it passed 51-49 to bring it to the full Senate floor for debate and a vote. And why I bring this up in particular. Look, I always agree with the idea, and you guys have heard this from me for many years now. We pass bills, we collect taxes, and then we never go back and figure out if we're spending the money well, right? So Bill Clinton did that in the 90s. He did an excellent job with that, actually, with the Republican Congress back then. And they cleaned up a bunch of government programs that needed to be cleaned up. But why this bill is so dangerous, and I specifically say that around the hoarding, because cutting $1 trillion out of Medicaid is going to kick, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, it's between 10 and 16 million Americans will lose access to healthcare. And it's way worse than that. That's like the top line headline that everybody's talking about. And it's much, much worse than that. What I'm really deeply concerned about, let alone the cuts to food stamps and school lunches, and I just don't even understand. Yay, let's starve people out too while we're at it. But the issue with the Medicaid, and this one is what gets me so upset, because I don't know how many people you know in rural America, but I do. And they voted for something without understanding what they were voting for. And I'm not even talking about the farm aid or any of that, or tariffs blocking $350 million of soybean sales from Nebraska to China. That's hitting those farmers. But the Medicaid cut in particular is what I'm deeply, deeply concerned about. Not just the 10 to 16 million Americans who are going to lose access to health care. In Kentucky alone, 35 rural hospitals will close.
Right.
And what city dwellers don't know is in rural America, there's basically, I'm going to overgeneralize, but there's, let's call it one hospital per county in the rural United States. So it's a 30-minute drive to get to your hospital, depending on where you live in the county, right? And it employs a lot of people, not even necessarily a lot, but proportionally, it employs a good percentage of high paid. Did we just lose Dave?
I think we lost Dave, but
so a high percentage of those jobs in these rural poor counties that are actually white collar and pay well and employ a bunch of people are these rural hospitals. I mean, so if I'm a farmer or rancher and I get my arm caught in a thresher, for example, and it rips my arm off like that kid in Iowa 30, 40 years ago now, instead of being able to go first to my local hospital where maybe they can stanch the bleeding and put the proper tourniquet on and properly ice the arm, whatever, and then get you to a level 1 trauma center in a major city, what's going to happen is not only is your county's hospital closing, but the county next to you, where now it might have been a 90-minute drive or a 60-minute drive, that one's closing too. So now your closest hospital, depending on where you live, could be an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And I'm not even just talking about hospital. That's where you go for your regular checkups. That's where you're going to get your medication. You maybe don't have access to full telehealth capabilities on your rural farm. You're 75 years old. You're not paying for Starlink. This is a very concerning issue coming ahead for the United States with should this bill pass in its current form, which based upon this vote to bring it to the floor, it really looks like it's going to happen. All right, let's take another pause here for a second, though. Where the hell is Dave?
Dave, you jinxed us.
I didn't do anything. You guys started talking about garbage men, and then I got taken out back, and I can't tell you what we had to talk about, but if I could tell you, I'd have to kill you. And I don't want you guys to,
don't
wind
tell
up
us.
Out back either. Yeah.
The thing about the rural hospitals, Ethan, I just want to add on to the terror of that, is not only are rural hospitals going to shut, and you're going to have to go to the other one near you, which might also shut. It also means that there's going to be not enough beds and not enough room at the hospitals that do stay open, if they can stay open. And if you're a rural citizen and you have to get to a city hospital, if you even survive that drive from wherever you are in rural, wherever, you're going to go to an overcrowded hospital, which we know from COVID what that looks like, right? We know people die in the waiting rooms and they die on the way there. And so I'm kind of confused. I mean, for so long we've said, like, you're going to get what you pay for. You voted for this. Fuck you. We tried to warn you. But that actually almost like disassociates us from the humanity of it. And part of me is kind of like, fuck you. You did this. But at the same time, like, I'm a human being. I don't want to see you die, even if you voted against rights for me, because I'm not an asshole.
I have one question on the rural hospitals, sort of on the math side. Because I saw something from one of the late night sessions in the Senate over the weekend that they're trying to push in an amendment, and I don't know how the math will work on this exactly, for $25 billion for rural hospitals to offset those Medicaid cuts. And I think it's probably going to make it into the Senate version. That'd have to be reconciled with the House, would see what happens. So, hey, I don't know if that's enough to save all those rural hospitals, but what it sure as fuck is an acknowledgement of the cruelty of the Medicaid cuts. And if that goes through to save the rural hospitals and all the people in the red states, again, I don't know if the math will work to save enough of them, but it sure as hell is an acknowledgement that they're trying to screw the poor. And that rider that they're trying to put in is saying, all right, we'll save the rural poor, but the urban poor can go F themselves.
Right.
Absolutely.
Death. Just
absolutely
cruel. So cruel.
But why that's such an important point, Dave, of what you just said, and this is, I've been really flummoxed lately about my political alignments, and but this is why I still am a liberal. It's because
that was me. Sorry, guys.
They're coming for Chrissy now.
Chrissy now too. She was busy talking about it too.
Yeah, watch out, Ethan. They're coming for you next.
I know. I'm just gonna sit here quietly and
don't say a word.
But the reason I really hold true to those core values is what you're saying, because not only are we talking about cutting $1 trillion from Medicaid, you're talking about cutting 20% off of food assistance programs.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're cutting 20% out of food assistance programs, I saw one food bank say a 10% cut out of those programs will likely result in some huge number. I don't know that they gave me an exact number, but a bunch of food banks are going to close. And it's just, why would you make people worry about being able to eat? I don't understand that at all. And it's just, so the cruelty in this for the tax cuts to disproportionately go to the higher end of the income charts. And I think this is an interesting data point too, which is, I just saw this data point in the last 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
The top 0.1% wealthiest people in the United States in 2025 now hold a greater proportion of the total wealth in the United States than they did in 1929.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's like, this is the first time we've exceeded that since
back
1929.
Yeah, make America great again, back to the best times in our history, like the Great Depression, right?
Yeah, it's really bad. I just don't even know where to go with that. This bill cannot proceed as it stands. It's just devastating.
Oh yeah, it can. Oh
Right,
yeah,
no,
it can.
And Josh Hawley, who kept saying you're going to cut 200,000+ Missourians off of Medicaid and they're going to have health care, I can't vote for this bill, voted yes.
Of course, because he made his show and then he got browbeaten by Trump and everyone else in the back room. Speaking of getting browbeaten, how were the garbage arenos, Chrissy? Did you have a chat with the French garbage mob there? Carefully.
I mean, yeah, they all talk to each other around the world, and
I'm not convinced that we're not. I think this is now the 3 a.m. show where there is some ghosts trying to shut our shit down. Like,
I don't think it's ghosts. I think people are coming for. Is there any money in the big beautiful bill for podcast security? Because they're trying to take us down.
What about the guy, the Swedish or Norwegian dude that came through and he had like the meme of JD Vance, and they like took him back, like they basically sent him back to Norway because he had propaganda.
That now, like the other terrifying news of the week, right? Like,
oh no, I have a worse one from Friday, but yes.
Yeah, about injunctions. Like, can't Trump essentially say right now, I'm going to pass an executive order that all anti-Trump podcasters aren't citizens anymore, and then would each have to bring suits individually to make sure that there aren't blatant unconstitutional searches and seizures and deportations going along? How the F about that, Ethan? My God.
Okay. You want me to go into that now?
I don't want you to go into it ever, but I think we need to know.
So the Supreme Court ruled 6-3. They had 3 big decisions on Friday, but this one in particular to me is the deepest and most kind of concerning in terms of, in addition to the, absolute immunity for the executive that they ruled on last year, about a year ago, which was just an absolute shocker to most of us. And but this one on 6-3 on Friday. So I've always said the birthright citizenship, that's not going to get thrown out, right? But they move forward with the suits. And what the question the Supreme Court answered had nothing to do with birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court addressed a different topic, which was the ability of U.S. district court judges anywhere in the United States, their ability to implement a nationwide injunction. The Supreme Court voted 6-3 on Friday. No, they cannot. And let me explain why this is so concerning. So, yes, there's all these weird little academic arguments that you can get into about, well, did the judiciary ever have this right? Blah, 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 blah. This one has very severe practical implications. And what it is the Supreme Court essentially ruled that if the president of the United States issues an executive order that is blatantly unconstitutional, if it's blatantly unconstitutional, you individually, as Dave was just describing, so if they try and squelch my First Amendment rights to free speech and they come and arrest me and say, you're not allowed to do a podcast anymore because you said something that wasn't praising to your leader, whatever. But again, and I'm going to get to this in a second too, I would have to file suit. The district court judge can only help me in that district court judge's circuit, essentially. And so if Dave was arrested, if Chrissy was arrested, because they would have to bring their own suits, or let's make it different. Let's say it's Joe Rogan got shut down. Simultaneously, if I win the injunction against the federal government, that doesn't help Joe Rogan. He's got to do it himself in Texas. You guys, we would file the suit together. So it doesn't quite work the same. But where this becomes so critical that I just keep trying to point these hypocrisies out to my friends on the right who celebrate this and say, yeah, those damn judges, liberal judges. Never forget that in the Fifth Circuit in Texas, there's a district court judge who was singled out repeatedly by conservatives to stop things like student loan debt relief. That was a single U.S. district court judge that killed that. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Stopped it nationwide. There were, I'm just trying to remember all the different pieces, but there were aspects of Joe Biden's agenda, time and time. Oh, the mifepristone nationwide halt happened out of a single district court judge in Texas who's known for being very, very conservative. And I'm going to go on a little bit more of a rant here for a moment, which is this whole fake idea of originalism that came up in the last 40 years. It never existed. Somewhere between 40 and 50 years ago is when that got ginned up by the right to stop the liberal Supreme Court, who said, yes, you must have civil rights. Yes, schools must be desegregated. The Brown decisions, right? Brown v. Board of Education was actually like 7 lawsuits. That all happened because district court judges were able to do things. And so originalism came around to say, no, we must read everything through the lens as it was written in 1789. Or in the case of the 14th Amendment, we have to narrowly construe it to as it was written and passed in 1868. And remember, why did we pass the 14th Amendment? This is a really important history lesson that gets to the birthright citizenship question. 1857 was the Dred Scott decision in the Supreme Court of the United States of America that said slaves, black slaves, who were not born in the United States, they were brought here, they have a kid in the United States, whatever, they have no rights. That was the horrific 1857 Dred Scott decision. So after the Civil War, when Dred Scott, I'm sure, helped that to come to fruition, the Civil War, during the Reconstruction period, passed all these additional amendments to the Constitution, including the 14th Amendment, which was to grant that people who are born here are citizens subject to our country's laws. And then the racist right at that time it was here in California. We've talked about this, Chrissy. California was extremely racist against Asian immigrants back then, mostly Chinese, some Japanese, but it was really mostly Chinese immigrants. They were doing the labor, of which, again, many of them came here as essentially indentured servants, which is half a step away from slavery. And in 1898, the Wong Kim Ark decision came down from the United States Supreme Court that said, yeah, if you're born here, regardless of your parents' nationality, the 14th Amendment, clarifying the 14th Amendment, saying, yes, that means you're a U.S. citizen. We've had 127 years of jurisprudence. Conservative and liberal justices alike have upheld birthright citizenship with certain very narrow carve-outs for let's say a Russian diplomat comes here or an Italian diplomat comes here and they give birth in the United States because they're a diplomat and they're here under special conditions. that child is not a U.S. citizen. So there are very, very narrow carve-outs related to that. And so what the Supreme Court did is they have now, in their very narrow reading of the Constitution, in their originalist narrow view, they have come up with a decision that says only those people who sued in those states are able to challenge the unconstitutional, on its face, executive order from the president. And therefore, in states like Texas, the big question now is, if you have undocumented parents, or even if one of your parents is undocumented, maybe one of them is a U.S. citizen, we don't know if these babies are U.S. citizens now. They're stateless babies. And look, if the United States is going to go down that route, it doesn't happen through fiat by the executive. That's not how the Constitution and the judiciary and the legislature, I mean, look, we have a constitutional amendment that doesn't get changed through an executive order, but that's what the Supreme Court ruled. And I just caution, it's going to affect the right in the future with liberal judges, with liberal presidents, but worse, this has a long-term ramification. Here's my prediction, by the way, and then I'm going to let you guys go off on your rant. My prediction is this. Just like after the Lochner era under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, where he talked about, I'm going to have to unpack this court because they just kept refusing to do the people's will and the will of the legislature and the will of all the people and the executive, that the Supreme Court kept doing that. We ended up having a Supreme Court that in 1937 and then really for the next 50-ish year, 40-ish years, so we have to reverse that 35 years of jurisprudence from a Supreme Court that said, no, you can't have workplace safety laws. No, you can't have health and safety for children. You can't have minimum wage laws. You can't have overtime laws. That's what happened between the turn of the century and 1937 is states and Congress and presidents were saying, we've got to have safety. These kids are losing their hands. They're dying, all this other stuff. People should be paid overtime, whatever that might look like. And the Supreme Court kept shooting it down. And it required something major. That's my prediction of what is going to happen, because this Supreme Court, not in all cases, but there are certain steps that they are taking, like the Roe v. Wade, as everybody referred to it. We had 50 years of that being the law of the land, and they're like, nah, I disagree. And so here we are. But I'd love to hear what you guys think or what questions you have about that.
I agree with it, that Roe versus Wade should have remained the law of the land, no question. But this goes, as you said initially, to core basic constitutional rights. And it could be any one of them. It could be the Second Amendment for all the people cheering this. A Democratic president, assuming we do have elections again in the future and we don't have a king anymore. But a Democratic president could issue a blatantly unconstitutional order to say that we're going to bring the National Guard in to confiscate every gun in the country and melt them all down and arrest all the gun owners. Oh my God, not again.
We lost Dave again.
Yeah, but Dave's point
Before he
is right, though, even though we just lost him for a second. But Dave's point is right, which is that's the point. These are constitutional principles. This isn't like an interpretation. So I think that there's a lot of argument over interpretation of law, that the executive has certain powers. If it's not specifically, named when Congress passes a law, and, we talk about the EPA as a great example of that in the Administrative Procedures Act, there are specific limits there, and some of that getting reined in. And I'm not saying I agree with getting rid of the Chevron doctrine or the hour deference, those types of things. But the point is those are like legitimately arguable. And what we got out of this Supreme Court decision, I'm going to say something that I don't think I've heard anybody say, but if that's where the Supreme Court is going with this, is to say the unitary executive theory really does exist, because the way the Constitution was written in 1789 says that the executive has all of these powers. If that's the case, then Marbury v. Madison, that even established, that was in 1812, 1817. I'm forgetting the year right now. Marbury v. Madison was a Supreme Court decision that essentially gave the courts its powers. Well, that was after 1789. So is the Supreme Court saying that the court really has no powers and that we should not even consider Marbury v. Madison because that was a court-created rule, essentially? That's what's scary to me.
People want to go back and then whatever their side they're on, they want to stop in history right there, right? Yep. So this is a great question that you're asking is the Supreme Court saying, how far is the Supreme Court going back to justify their arguments or their decision making? And are we at a point where we're just ready to undo everything?
They want to go back to 1789. They want to go back to 1789, and that's what you're talking about, Chris. I've been warning about this for a long time. It's not going back to the 1950s. Remember the left saying, oh, they want to go back to the 1950s. It's not the 1950s they want to go back to. Not 1789. Wealthy white landowners can vote.
Yeah.
Women can't vote. Minorities can't vote because they don't ever get citizenship because they were brought here. It's really concerning to me that that's kind of where this is headed.
But how does that even work? Like, that means Marco Rubio, he's fucked. He's got to leave. You know what I mean? Like, some of these people are like, I mean, it's like, how many Irish immigrants ended up becoming, or families of Irish immigrants ended up in presidential positions? Like, so all of the Irish immigrant congressmen and senators, and they all have to get fucked. Then where are they going? You know what I mean? Because the Irish were brought here as indentured servants, and so then none of their ancestors are valid here. I mean, like, it's absolutely, like, it's kind of bonkers. And then, like, just Louisiana get to go back to giving, like, are they going back to the French? Do the French just claim Louisiana?
Yes. I mean, if I was France right now, I probably would make that argument, right? And no, I'm very serious. I mean, that's what's wrong with some of these Supreme Court decisions. That, in my mind, this is just my opinion, of course, but that's what is wrong with this whole originalism. I don't know. We even interviewed a guy on KGO that I argued originalism with back in the day, and it's like the problem is, when you do that, and to your point, Dave, about the Second Amendment, well, gosh darn it, if I'm elected president as a Democrat, my executive order is only legal firearms are those that existed in 1789. So you can have muskets.
Right.
The cartridge rifles, cartridge firearms did not exist back then. So you can't have them.
You could go after any right you want to. And by the way, I think we're on to something here, because every time we say something, somebody drops off. It's like there's a trap door that's going to come after one of us. So just be careful.
Here's my kind of bigger picture perspective, and then we've got to get to some light stuff before we have to go, but because apparently it's causing us lots of issues talking about these topics.
It is.
But here's the issue is what has happened, and this goes back to one of my key arguments about the Democratic Party in the last particularly 5 years, but maybe it's been 10 years. Identity politics, if that's what you build your brand around, is a loser. And so what we have done is everybody has been balkanized, meaning if I'm this type of a black person, I only care about these issues and everybody else can go screw themselves. If I'm LGBT, if I'm trans, now that's what I'm focused on. That's all I care about. Whereas if I'm trans rights within the gay community is even controversial, right? So I just want equal rights for everybody. I don't want anybody to have more rights than somebody else.
When you listen to American conversations, Zephyr and I will sit in a restaurant or a cafe and hear Americans talking, or even walking on the street. The dominant thing is I, me, I. That is not conversations in France and around the world, and I would say in Europe, okay, the conversations are about how do we as a country, how do we as a group of people, how do we survive? We talked about that a little bit previously, where it's like they've got 17 different political parties, but at the end of the day, the majority of people who want the best for the people of France will come together instead of like shooting off on all their little factions that they're a part of. They coalesce and say, like, for the greater good. Americans are so fractured into me, I, specific needs, that they've forgotten it's we the people. They really don't believe it's me the person, not we the people anymore. And that's on the Democrats, because they were the party of unions and working class and bringing people together against the man, and now they are the man. So fuck them. I mean, like, fuck all of them, but also, like, this is what you get.
They are the man, but they swallowed whole the identity politics thing.
Yes.
Yes,
as
yes.
Ethan's saying. I mean, think about that really simple campaign ad that the Trump campaign threw out. You know, the Democrats are for they, them, and Donald Trump is for you. That's
Right.
actually, as divisive as that is, kind of unifying for a lot of the country, right? You know, they care about all these little groups. They kind of flipped that on them and did it brilliantly. And that worked so well that all the individuals out there thought that the Trump administration was going to help they themselves.
That is the mentality of, I don't care if rural hospitals get shut, and I don't care if people die of COVID, which comes out of those motherfuckers' mouths. And then it's like, instead of us as a group of people being like, I care about everything, it's the Democrats cannot ever respond with a message that just is, that's not okay. We care about each other. We're all in this together.
So back to the big, beautiful bill, you're talking about dismantling essentially many aspects of the safety net that we built, and what the problem is, and it goes to both topics, right? Whether you're talking about what the after effect of the Supreme Court decision is going to be, or what this so-called big, beautiful bill was going to do, is there's a reason why we did these things in the first place. So we found that hungry people in the streets leads to problems.
Right.
For the whole society, we found that solving that problem, let's say through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, right, food stamps, we found that that was actually beneficial to the farmers. We
Correct.
found that that worked for the economy.
Walmart does not want SNAP to go away. Walmart, A, their employees are the biggest recipients, and B, that's where most people spend their money.
But that's my point. So this is where I blame the left as well, right? So the Democrats in particular, maybe not the left as a whole, but it keeps going back to the core issue of how we find ourselves in this position. Because when the Democrats were in power, other than Bill Clinton, and he had a Republican Congress, so he didn't have Democrats backing him up on this one. But when Democrats are in power, yes, we have a tendency to try and balance the budget or make the budget, the annual deficit go down. But we never look at the programs that become easy targets for the right to focus on and be like, yes, why is this person, why are we not making sure that these people can't get welfare benefits if they're lying, cheating, stealing the system, whatever that is. I'm not saying that it's rampant, but it's enough that the right is able to capitalize on it. On the case of Medicaid, I have no idea how the right is being so successful on this one, because a huge percentage of these 10 to 16 million people are going to be Republicans. Their voters are going to lose their own medical care. So it's like, I don't know how they have successfully pulled that one off.
As Mitch McConnell says, they'll get over it.
They'll get over it. That's
Everyone,
right.
no, what's her name? Everyone dies.
Yes, that was Joni Ernst in Iowa. Everyone dies. Who cares? So look, we have got to start talking. This is why the whole time, and I think you two might know this about me, that's why this whole time I continue talking to my friends on the right. I keep those channels of communication open. I remind them when I go on their shows, we have far more in common as Americans than we don't. We probably agree on 90 to 95% of things, and they will focus on the 5% of things that they meaning those who benefit from our division. we'll focus on those 5% because nowadays it generates more revenue because it's more controversial, better for social media, but more clicks, more watching, etc. But it's just bad for us. And I understand shutting people out and down. I get that. I've had to do that with some people too, where it's just like there's no communication. If you ever get over that someday, call me back. But we have to keep lines of communication open and not just shut everybody down. So Dave, keep talking to your cousins. I think it's very important. And Chrissy, your neighbor in New Orleans, that kind of stuff. But before we have to go, I just have to share something. Did you guys see Peter Thiel's interview with Russ Dutat of the New York Times?
Please share. Please.
Well, I'm not going to give it all away.
Okay.
Peter Thiel might be the current scariest oligarch.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
And so Palantir, he was an original guy with Elon back at PayPal. They're close buddies. He's also an immigrant like Elon, who holds some very, very interesting views about humanity. Well, in this, Russ Dutat's a conservative, by the way. And the topic of the Antichrist came up, and Russ actually pushed back on him, essentially saying, how do you not see that what you're doing is what you're describing is what the Antichrist would do? Yeah. So please go watch that. And then, so now we're going to get to the police state for a second in a Not the Onion to wrap this episode up, because we've got to have a little light humor in this case. It involves the police. Are you aware that bank robberies are down, by the way? In 2023, there were 1,362 bank robberies reported to the FBI, which is a massive decrease from the early 1990s.
I can't believe people still try to rob banks like that.
I can't either.
It's just so dumb. So dumb. High point in 1991 was 9,388 reported bank robberies. So it's way down. Because I guess those with enough brains were like, yeah, this is not a good business anymore. There's just way too much technology, way too much. They're always going to catch us. So this one is from MLive, which is one of Michigan's newspapers. Here's the headline for you. Bank hostage standoff, : police dangle beverage from drone to lure out man, shoot him.
Oh, wow. What was the beverage?
Dr. Pepper.
Because that could get me. If I were robbing a bank and they dangled like a really craft-made cocktail out for me, I like to think he got the beverage.
You come out with your arms up. I don't know.
Yeah, no, with my hand out.
So
I hope he got to enjoy the drink before he took a bullet to the chest or head or
holy
wherever.
shit.
So here's the problem that it really annoys the crap out of me. The police in this case, back to our constitutional rights.
Oh shit, okay.
We don't know what the beverage was.
Right.
Why? Because the police flew drone in, and when they flew the drone in, everybody who was watching and recording what was going on, they said, stop recording. And everybody complied.
Wow.
And if you're from a distance watching this, the police every state has its own laws about how far you have to stay away when they're doing stuff. And I get that. And the police absolutely have the right to say, you got to stay 50 feet away when we've got our guns drawn, on a bank robbery, right? But if I'm standing behind that line, I can film a drone.
Yeah.
It's my First Amendment right.
Yeah.
And so there are limits to the First Amendment. It goes back to these idiotic free speech absolutist arguments. Police have a right to say you can't do this within this distance. It's just absolutely because the police have to be able to execute their powers, et cetera. But here we don't know what the beverage was. Dave, I'm going to go with the fact that it was a Miller Lite.
Okay.
Well, it can't be Bud Light.
That's very Midwestern, right? Yeah.
Yes, very Midwestern.
Northern Midwestern.
Saginaw Township, Michigan, right?
Wouldn't it be more like banquet beer or some shit like that? Or like what's like really Midwestern?
Well, the banquet beer is more mountain. That's more Coors, so that'd be more around the Mountain West.
Okay.
Rocky
Yeah,
Mountains,
no, Miller Lite is from Milwaukee. At least it used to be made in Milwaukee.
Yeah,
and Milwaukee, as they say in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Can we just go back to they shot the guy? Like, can you do that? Aren't you supposed to arrest him first? I'm so confused. They gave him a drink.
Yeah, It was a non-lethal shot
Okay,
to
I
take
was
him
like,
down.
the fuck did they just shoot this guy? Like, doesn't he get anything's possible in America right now? This is why I'm questioning it.
I got one more to bring us together also, just because I'm dying to share this video. I'll put it up here. It's my favorite thing of the year, north of Boston, in Gloucester, one of the craziest municipalities ever. It's where all the not-so fishermen come from who do amazing things. It was the annual Greasy Pole competition in the harbor of Gloucester. Long telephone pole. We'll put it up here in a sec. They grease the hell out of it. There's a flag at the end. They're like 20 feet above the ocean, and you have to try and run out on the greasy pole, and you win it if you grab the flag, and almost nobody's able to, because try running on a greasy telephone pole. Good luck. Now, fear factor, things like that, I would do almost all of them. Things don't bug me. You could not pay me enough money to run out.
So are sharks circling, waiting for people to just fall, or
there aren't as many sharks right up there? Like if they were off the Cape or off Martha's Vineyard, there might be.
Wait, hang on a second. Dave, did you say Martha's?
Martha's.
Thank you.
Martha's Vineyard. The vineyard. It's not. You shouldn't even say Martha's. It's just the vineyard, guy.
Thank
you. Yeah. No way I'm running out on top of a greasy pole. I would do most of those fear factor type challenges. I just think that I'm crossing my legs right now under the table. It would be way too easy for me to quickly turn into a they, them if you fall the wrong way.
Sure.
Never mind losing a tooth or breaking a nose. That's not something.
Or a neck.
Ever do. Yeah.
Women do not come up with these competitions, by the way. Like, it's just
no, that's men. Men do this stuff.
Just like, women are like, what the fuck are you doing? And we have to be.
Why do women live longer?
This is
we're
why.
Not as dumb.
Yes.
Because guys do stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes, we do stuff like this all the time. It's. I'm just still curious why Dave wants to bring up grease poles. But with that, thank you all for listening. And watching, follow us on the socials, Should Be a Morning Show. And you can always email us, shouldbeamorningshow@gmail.com, or send us a message on our website, shouldbeamorningshow.com.
If we're still here.